The cryptocurrency market has been collapsing. However, that's not what I want to talk about today. Instead, I want to talk about a couple of issues that have been made very apparent by this recent move in the market. And of course, if you're selling right now, what are you doing? This is an amazing time to buy all of those projects with good fundamentals, with good technology, etc. I'm sure you'll do amazing once the bull market continues to run higher. However, the two issues that I'm talking about that remain in the cryptocurrency market are very high correlation. So if you look at Ethereum, Bitcoin, Litecoin, virtually every single currency, maybe even the top 100 aside from a couple outliers. And the second issue is this downside risk. There's a ton of downside risk volatility in the cryptocurrency market purely due to the fact that this is still a very, very risky asset. And so this can turn a lot of people off from investing into the cryptocurrency markets. So over the past couple of months, I've been taking these two different market issues into consideration when formulating my idea for a cryptocurrency called Blackswan, and that is what I'm going to be announcing today. Now, before I get into the video talking about Blackswan, I do want to give two little disclaimers. Number one, Blackswan is still in development. We are currently testing a lot of the features, a lot of the economics. All of the smart contracts are basically done being coded, all of the front end, etc. The only thing left is just testing and making sure everything is exactly functioning how we want it to. So if you do have any suggestions after watching this video as to how we can make Blackswan better in trying to accomplish its goals of providing an amazing downside risk hedge for the cryptocurrency markets, while also being one of the only anti-fragile tokens, which I'll go over in just a second, then feel free to send me a message. Feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, or even make sure to join our Telegram group where you can also talk to us at the development team at Blackswan, or through our website, blackswan.network. However, let's get right into how Blackswan works and how it differentiates itself from all of the other cryptocurrencies in the market. Now, one of the most important underlying values of many decentralized finance projects is the idea of liquidity. Now, how can you guarantee liquidity? Well, you can pay people to provide liquidity. And that's why you see a lot of projects right now that provide some sort of staking rewards or some sort of extra benefits for providing liquidity on DEXs. And most of the time, these rewards come in a consistent manner. So let's say that I'm trying to get people to provide liquidity for my token that I just launched. Then likely what I would do is I would say, okay, you're going to get a bonus 40% APY return on your investment into the liquidity pool, in addition to the fees that you're already earning from the decentralized exchange, etc. However, there are a couple of issues with this. One mainly being the consistent return that a majority of tokens incentivize liquidity providers with. So the issue with this is that it really only makes sense with this incentive to hold your tokens in these liquidity pools during periods of stability and or growth. So let's say that I'm providing liquidity for a token that relates to Bitcoin. So let's say I'm doing Bitcoin USD Tether on Uniswap. Now, this might be a great time during this period of Bitcoin's trading to provide liquidity because the price is very stable. So I'm not going to experience too much impermanent loss. I'm most likely going to have a relatively decent income from the trading fees. However, the one time where I will very likely consider to exit this liquidity position is during a period of uncertainty. So let's say that the market starts collapsing like it just did recently. Well, I'm most likely going to exit that liquidity position because while I might be making 40% APY on my Bitcoin USD Tether position on Uniswap, it still doesn't make sense with the potential risk of this token collapsing to, let's say, a tenth of the price that it was before. So during periods of uncertainty, liquidity naturally goes away from the market, which is when the market needs it the most. Because during periods of uncertainty, that's when the most people are going to be selling their coins or are going to be opening new positions. And so that's why you can see even on Bitcoin right now, this is one of the highest volume moments in the past recent history of Bitcoin, So how does Black Swan solve this? Black Swan incentivizes liquidity in a non-linear manner, meaning instead of providing aggressive incentives to liquidity providers during periods of stability or progressively over time, like many other tokens do, instead, Black Swan provides incentives, aggressive incentives to liquidity providers, mostly during periods of uncertainty. So the idea here is, let's say that this was the price chart of Black Swan. During the period of growth or sideways movement, let's say during this period right here, then you would be receiving your normal liquidity mining rewards from the fees, trading on the exchange, etc. And it really makes sense to provide liquidity during this period because there's very little risk. However, then once there starts to be uncertainty in the market starts collapsing, there's a very large downside move, then Black Swan will all of a sudden massively increase its rewards to liquidity providers to make it so that, number one, there will be the most liquidity during periods of uncertainty. And also there will be a large demand coming in for Black Swan during periods of uncertainty because people want to purchase Black Swan in order to receive those staking rewards from providing liquidity. So how does this work? It might sound a little bit confusing because on the surface, it sounds like it makes sense. You give the most whenever people should be getting the most, and you give the least whenever people shouldn't really need a huge incentive in order to provide liquidity. So how this works is basically Black Swan is like a giant insurance contract on the Ethereum blockchain. So over time, Black Swan is slowly selling a certain portion of the supply that it is minting into stablecoin, which is then stored in the Black Swan fund. So there's this thing in Black Swan called the Black Swan fund that basically collects a certain percentage of the supply over time, very, very slowly, and then sells that supply on a DEX to stablecoin to then hold in that smart contract. Now, what this smart contract does is once liquidity goes below a certain threshold, which you can learn more about on our white paper, which I'll leave a link to down in the description down below. Then once that threshold is broken, Black Swan then takes those tokens and uses them to mint new LP tokens to then distribute to the liquidity providers. So if you're providing liquidity to Black Swan and you're staking those LP tokens, then once there is a period of uncertainty in the market, you will be receiving more LP tokens comprised of 50% Black Swan and 50% stablecoin. So naturally, these returns during periods of uncertainty will be extremely high, and with these high returns, you will also have an increasing demand for the token itself. So most likely what will happen, the goal of Black Swan, is to have not only an appreciating asset during periods of uncertainty, but also rewarding stakers and people who have been trusting their money to provide liquidity during these periods of uncertainty to basically greatly exceed the loss that they're gaining from the increase in volatility or the loss that they're gaining from the impermanent loss of staking and providing liquidity with their tokens. Now, there are some other features of Black Swan which we are still ironing out, or that are not necessarily as important to the main mission of Black Swan, which is that downside protection and being anti-fragile in terms of being the most valuable when there's the most uncertainty. But this project over time, this is just the beginning for what we plan on doing at Black Swan. We want Black Swan to eventually become a governance token to a much larger ecosystem of hedging products, trading products, or whatever else we decide to do in the future with this project. This is just the very beginning, and we will be announcing our plans slowly over time. However, if you do think you're interested in what we're doing here at Black Swan, make sure to join our Telegram group down in the description down below. And make sure to listen for news on the LBP, the liquidity bootstrapping pool, where we will be distributing the tokens and hopefully building a very, very strong community moving into the future. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and see you in the next one.